All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part two of the the presentation I had a few days ago relating to the UFO sightings of 2008. We're going through the years and going through the 21st century. And I'm going to pick this right up. If you haven't seen part one, stop this right here, go back, look at part one. Actually, it doesn't really matter. It's just various sightings throughout the year. We're going to start off with, well, actually, before I get into that, I'll just mention I'm treating the Stephenville, Texas UFO event of January 2008 as a separate presentation. And I've been actually going into that for those last couple of days. And I have a feeling that presentation by itself will probably be a good 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour. There's quite a lot going on with Stephenville. And, we often think of it as like one date, January 8th, 2008, where a lot of people in that very small town saw an enormous object. But as it turns out, and I think many of you probably knew this, Stephenville had been the scene of quite a bit of UFO activity, at least that part of Texas, for a month by then. There was some kind of flap going on there. The events of January 8th were the most significant of them, the best reported, and probably the most dramatic, but there was a lot else going on there. But the sighting itself is very, very, there's a lot of detail there. And I had forgotten a lot. I'm not going to lie. Like, I remembered when it happened. I thought I knew the case pretty well, but there's just a lot more going on there. And so I've put together what I think is a pretty good presentation of that. And I might even record that as early as tomorrow. So do look forward to that. That's going to be quite interesting. I can guarantee it. But for now, let's go through basically the second half of 2008. I brought out a bunch of sightings, and honestly, there were just so many that I had to leave out. But what we have here is still quite good. So let me just start. We're going to go to Turkey. This was a very, very big series of events that actually UFOs that were recorded from 2007 through 2009. And we're just going to talk about it here. Right near Istanbul, essentially in Istanbul, the little town of Kumburgaz, which is, if you can see that little dot there, right at the Bosphorus, which is the dividing point between the Black Sea on one side and then essentially the Sea of Marmara leading to the Mediterranean on the other side. So this is the basic object that was being recorded. Now, the situation, I'll just, before we get into the details there was a man, I actually don't remember this Turkish man's name. He was at the, he had a job, he was at the shore there, and he had a very, very good quality zoom digital camera. It was 2008, they were becoming very widespread. And essentially the story would be, there was an unusual light that would be noticed, but like with the naked eye, all you're seeing is just a light. It seemed unusual. There seemed something about it. And it's only when he would zoom in that you could see the image that I just showed you here, this type of a object. And we'll do a zoom in on that in a minute. But so there's a skeptical argument on this. I'll bring it up a little later. I don't believe that skeptical argument. I'll just say it right here. But what ended up happening is that throughout 2007 and then going into 2008, more and more people became very interested in these videos because it wasn't just one. There's videos throughout each of those 3 years. This particular night here, June 8th, 2008, I believe he had like 2.5 hours just from that night alone. And that particular night, you'd get this incredible craft at times. And there were other parts of that night where there were these clustering orb type of lights hovering in the sky. So it was quite interesting. Eventually, what you end up having is that the tapes, or I guess the files, were handed over to a group in Turkey called the Sirius UFO Space Science Research Center. Sirius, that's SIRIUS, like the star. And the man running that was named Hakton Octagon. I met Hakton a couple of times. He's I think a very very good, very serious researcher. And here's another image of this. This is from July of 2008, a little more of a close-up. And so let's take a look at my bullet points here. Yeah, series of videos. Oh yeah, so the guy who recorded these, and again, I cannot remember his name, but Hockton interviewed him. I know other people also interviewed him. He seems very straightforward. There's really no issue about this being a hoax. Lots of people look through his camera. I remember what the late Dr. Roger Lear went out there. I remember talking to Roger about this, in fact. So he visited Turkey at some point during all of that and got a chance to look through the camera. And you could see, like, when you zoom in, it's like, boom, there it is. That object is there. So, I think a lot of people were quite impressed by the video. Serious organization, they did their own analysis. I know that they authenticated it. They said this is a real object, et cetera, et cetera. And as I say here, the object was not readily visible, or at least it was not extremely visible, except as a moving light over the water. And then when you zoomed in, you would see the shape. There is a skeptical argument. I've got it listed right here. Basically, I read through this pretty carefully. There's a few skeptical blogs that tried to deal with this, essentially arguing that this was nothing more than the reflection of lights from yachts on the water. I actually never really understood how you could make that argument. I looked at the website. I tried to figure out the logic of this, the reflection of yachts. So their argument was that the camera was not aimed that high in the sky. And if you were not aiming the camera high in the sky, you were seeing actually the city, and you were seeing these yachts. And, there was never any kind of detailed what's called a photometric analysis. There's no technical analysis that the skeptics offered that really proved their case, not in my view anyway. Whereas on the other hand, I read some fairly detailed analyses by supporters of this that got into the angle of the light and indicating that it just was way too high for this to be from any craft that's on the water. So that's basically the argument. This is Hockton right here. He has talked about this quite a lot. He just says here, in this one instance, in this amazing video footage, physical forms of UFOs and their metallic structures are clearly noticeable. And then, oh yes, let's get into this. He says, what is more important is that in the close-up of some footages of the objects, entities in them, what is wrong with my voice here, can be distinctly made out. Now, let's take a look at this. I'm sure many of you have been aware of this. This was once on the cover of UFO magazine when Bill Burns was running that in its heyday. So on the top here is, you can see there's something in the middle. What the hell is that? Does it look like aliens? Sure, a little bit. Yes, it does. I mean, let's just be real here. And then below is kind of a blow up of those beings. Now, keep in mind, the zoom in is not the same as what's on top. This is video. These are not separate pictures. So I think the zooming in was taken from a different video frame, possibly, than what's on top. Similar, but not exactly the same. But these are all video. And so, yeah, you get this argument. It's like, what in God's name is that? Look, I mean, let's just get real. It does look like two alien beings. Is that a real photo? Is that genuine? Or is there some other way that this can be misinterpreted? Well, I'm just personally not aware of a really good case that was made to debunk these videos. I would like to know, like, there's probably some of you watching this who are really on top of the Turkish case. And if you've got an alternate opinion, I would like to know. I have not really encountered a strong skeptical argument about these videos. Now, the sightings did seem to stop after 2009. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns here. Why did they start? Why? What were these objects? What was this craft doing there? And why did it end after 2009? There doesn't seem to be any video after that point. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's got the answer to that. But the videos themselves are quite interesting. And again, you have this situation where it's when you zoom in on the light that you see this craft. So, okay, well, interesting stuff. Let's keep going onward here. Yeah, in '08, there was actually a couple of really interesting aviation cases over the United Kingdom, quite a few. I'm not picking all of them. There'll be one that I have, I think, for December, so we'll get into that one. Here's one. This one made the news. This is quite significant over Cardiff in Wales, a city I've never visited. Got as far as Bath. Would love to see Cardiff. But anyway, a near collision. This, again, this is a big newspaper case. And I'll just go through the bullet points here. So you had a police helicopter crew. They were fairly low over the ground, I think maybe 500 feet. I'm trying to remember. And the crew members, these are police officers, were quite convinced that they saw a genuine flying saucer. And they went after this thing, practically collided with them. And they were near a military base when this happened as well. So that's interesting as well. Anyway, they were forced to bank very sharply to avoid being hit by this thing. They described the UFO, the object, as flying saucer shape. That was the words that they used. And they actually went after this. They got as far as North Devon. And if you go back on the map here, that's Cardiff. That you're going across the water here, and Devon's way down at the bottom here as you get, toward the tip of the United Kingdom. So they went quite a way, and they got low on fuel, so they had to go back. So that was that. And there was a spokesman for the South Wales Police. He said, "We can confirm the air support unit cited an unusual aircraft. This was reported to the relevant authorities for their investigation." I'm not aware of any follow-up to this. I tried finding what was the resolution to this. Did they give an answer to it? Not quite sure. Very, very interesting. It did get some, attention at the time. Here's another quote from it. This is an anonymous source who told the press, but he apparently was inside with the police department. He says, "They are convinced it was a UFO. It sounds far-fetched, but they know what they saw. These guys are hardened professionals and know people will take the mickey, but they are certain they saw a UFO." So there you go. Here's another encounter with official, like military and a UFO. This is in the state of Washington. Oh, I remember this. This is at a place called Spanaway Lake Park. Basically, I think it seems like a water park or a fun place. You take your kids. So you've got middle of the afternoon. A man is seeing this highly reflective spherical object. Very reflective. He said it was almost chrome-like. So I'm assuming it reflected a lot of sunlight. About a mile up there. So not super high up. He said he noticed a band around the middle. It seems a bit contradictory to call it clearly visible and then subtle in the same phrase, and that's kind of what he did. But apparently it was subtle, but apparently it was clearly visible, a horizontal band around the middle of this thing. So visualize this yourself. You're seeing this round spherical object that's got a horizontal band around the middle. It's highly reflective. You are going to think, what in God's name is that? Is it a balloon? That might be one thing you would wonder. He did the, arm's length thing and said it was about the size of a BB. Okay. And then he adds, it disappeared after about 10 seconds of being pursued by McCord Air Force Base jet fighters. It did not change direction, but just suddenly disappeared. And I think we've all been in this situation. He goes on, he says, no one else seemed to notice. They were just too busy swimming and frolicking. Yeah, you could easily see something like that happening. People just don't pay attention to these things. But so you would think, okay, that could be like a balloon, except it's not just going to disappear. And why would there be jets apparently chasing after this? If you want to be ultra skeptical, you could come up with all kinds of excuses to make for it. You might say, well, the jets had nothing to do with that thing, and maybe he just maybe he imagined it. Maybe he had some kind of other illusion or an eye defect, or you never really know. We don't know who this man was, but I included it. I thought it was a believable case, and so I thought it would be useful to include here. Now, here's one from taken at the Gilliland Ranch, James Gilliland over. This is the same part of the country, actually, as the last sighting that we just talked about. This is over Mount Adams, which, of course, is a very, very majestic, beautiful mountain in North America. And, the thing is, there are constantly claims by individuals who go up to James's property. I have never been to the ranch. I have met James many times. We've spoken. And it's almost inevitable that people will claim that they see unusual things there. I remember a conversation I had, I don't know, maybe a year ago on Jimmy Church's Fade to Black show. Jimmy Church was out there one time, and he told me about an incredible UFO sighting he had out there with a couple of other people who did see it with him. It's almost normal to hear these things. There is something going on, I think, over in this region. So there's a story associated with it. I think I've got it on the bullet. So there's someone who was there, and they just said, when the UFO appeared above the top of the mountain, I thought it was a plane because from the distance, it looked like one shining on the sun, except that it didn't move anywhere. It was just hovering above the top of the mountain and then disappeared. I remember wondering, how did this plane appear there so fast and where did it go? Well, it's an interesting case, like without a doubt. And that's not the only one. When going through back cases of 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, there are actually quite a few photographs of UFOs over or around Mount Adams taken from the James's property by various people. So I don't know that I would agree with the interpretation that a lot of people have of these objects. Typically, it's extremely benign. Everyone over there says they're from Arcturus. Like, how do you know this? I have no clue that anyone could know such things. But I will say, like, it seems difficult for me to deny that there are a lot of UFOs that are being reported there. So that was just one. And I'm going to go back to it again just to show you. It is like, it's kind of unusual. So you see the thing in this small square, but it's enlarged. And I don't see how that looks like an normal aircraft. It doesn't look like a helicopter. It doesn't look like an airplane. And if you go on the witness testimony, they're saying the thing hovered there for quite a while and then just disappeared. Kind of, like the spherical object that this guy was talking about at the water park on June 16th. This is July 13th, basically a month later, same region, and an object that appears and then just disappears, I do think is kind of interesting. It's very interesting. So let's go on. I'm jumping a month later. By the way, as I was preparing this slideshow, I had so many other cases through the summer of 2008, and I just thought, oh, good Lord, I've got too many. So this is a very interesting one, and there's quite a lot here. I'm going to read. A woman wrote in. She was with her boyfriend in Emmetsville, Indiana. So you can see this is right by the border with Kentucky, not far from Illinois. Okay. She called it the scariest night of my life. So that's a good introduction to it, indeed. So essentially, they're driving on this old dirt road. I'm not sure what they're doing. It's 9:30, so it's dark. There's cornfields on either side of where they're driving. And they notice, oh, yeah, there's people on the side of the road. I think she sees two different cars at different points, and there's people out of their cars looking at things. Like she's noticing that something's unusual here. And that is when she and her boyfriend noticed two bright lights above the trees. There are trees all around them. So there's two of them, okay, and they're horizontal. So the one of them, the light to their left, descended below the tree line, and they were not able to see it. The other light was still there. They turn onto a country road, and their decision is, let's go toward these lights. This is very interesting. Let's go find out what this is all about. And they're partly wondering, or convincing themselves maybe that this is a radio tower. I'm not sure why they thought that if they're seeing the lights apparently move, but who knows? This was one thing that they were telling themselves. So they're going down this road, and now they see a light. I assume one of those two lights moving toward them. She gets scared. She says, "Stop the van." And then the object starts moving in the opposite direction. So apparently it backs away. She's like, it did not turn around like an airplane. It just started going in the opposite direction, away from us, rather fast. So they start the van again, and they resume and going after this thing. But they had a hard time seeing because they were in a very densely wooded area. So they keep going. She says, in between breaks in the trees, we could see the light, and it was getting smaller and disappeared. We decided to turn around, and as we turned in on his side of the road, there was this big, long, fat cigar-shaped thing. It was huge. Lights were going down the sides of it. She's got a graphic illustration in a moment you'll get to see. Lights were going down the sides of it, and they were going in a row down the side of it, and then instantly they would go down the side of it again. Not sure I really understand what she's saying here. Lights were going down the sides of it, and they were going in a row down the side of it, and then instantly they would go down the side of it again. So I guess sort of like a rotating lights, like flashing lights that might go in a pattern, perhaps. She says, I was so scared. We couldn't believe what we were seeing, and it changed my life. It's pretty strong statements. They backed up the vehicle, and then she sees this object more clearly. She said it was about the size and shape of an airplane, except that there were no wings on this. And, and my little thing is blocking. What is it? It was very close to them. There, let's put the Rich. I got the Richard L. Members thing up here, but apparently I need to make it a little bit less intrusive, don't you think? Anyway, it was very close to them. So, and then she goes on here. It was going down behind the trees, looking like it was landing, but it made absolutely no noise. A lot of these objects, they make no noise. When I was going through the Stephenville case, you've got over, I think, 200 witnesses to that. None of them ever heard a sound from that enormous object. So here you go again. She's also reporting absolutely no noise. We were so scared. I kept telling my boyfriend to go, go, go. I kind of like the way she wrote this. This is out of Filer's Files. He drove fast, and finally we made it back to the main highway. Duration of sighting was 8 to 10 minutes, and I kept looking back, and I didn't see it anymore. We could not believe what we had seen. The lights were so weird as they flickered down a row down the side of the craft. So this is her image. I think she must have used like Microsoft Paint or something pretty basic, but you get a pretty good idea of what she was talking about here. So I think these gray squares are the lights. And these black squares, God, who knows, but maybe that's what it looked like. So this is not what we would call, Renaissance artwork by Leonardo, but she got the job done. So this thing comes behind the trees, quite large. Again, keep in mind, we're talking in the middle of these massive woods. How are you going to get a craft of that size in there? So I think that's interesting because, if we choose to believe her story, I guess that I choose to believe it. That's why I included it here. You got to ask yourself, what is such a large object doing there? Is it just trying to hide? And it's like, damn it, can't get away from these nosy humans or these nosy people while we, process this abduction or conduct these repairs or whatever they happen to be doing. But something brought them into Evansville, Indiana. And it seems to me that hiding in a wooded area is what they were probably intending to do. And but even so, there were some drivers out and about that noticed them. That was kind of interesting. Let's go continue here. Yeah, Fort Lauderdale. So we're at the southern, part of Florida. I will mention that I found in the second half of 2008 many really excellent UFO observations. And I included a couple here, but there really were quite a lot of them. And I thought they were generally very high quality. So this is one. Let me take off the little thing there. So this is a man writing in. This is about 10:15 p.m. So again, it's dark. My neighbor was sitting on a chair outside when a strange object passed over him going south about 1,500 feet west of the Fort Lauderdale airport, west of I-95, crossing the landing and takeoff way. I like when they give in this level of detail. It just, I don't know, makes me feel better when I'm reading a case. It was a triangular shaped object with white lights underneath, and no noise was heard from this thing headed for Miami. We never saw any plane north-south, always east-west or west-east. I include a drawing of it. I don't think we have that drawing here, do we? Oh, we do, yes. Let me go back. At 1:30 a.m., I called TV Channel 7 News to see if someone had reported something similar, but they said no. And this is the drawing. Not a bad drawing. People do their best. I don't know if I could do any better. I'm not much of an artist myself. So I think it's interesting. You've got what appear to be lights on the underside and a kind of bar in the center here. I'm not sure that I've seen many triangles identified in that manner, where you get these types of lights in the center. So again, it's an unusual description. I want to keep going here. This is one from Melbourne, Australia. Let me add that in there. Here we go. And that's, you can see the bottom of Australia facing Tasmania. If those of you don't know much about Australian geography, topography, there you go. It's at the bottom of Down Under. The only further south you can go is Tasmania. Melbourne's a great city, by the way. At least I very much enjoyed it when I was there before COVID. Always before COVID. So this is what this man writes. I thought this was a pretty interesting description. It says, my wife and I were just unwinding in the Royal Botanical Gardens on October 5th at 5 p.m. So we can assume it's still fairly light. When my wife noticed something strange in the sky, she told me, this is not a plane. We then took 4 pictures of the object flying towards southeast Melbourne. What was incredible to our eye was how this object was bright and shiny. It wasn't moving faster than a plane, and it took only 2 minutes to appear and disappear from our view. And check this out. That is the object. And I do find that to be a very unusual object. It doesn't look like a balloon. It certainly doesn't look like any airplane that I have ever seen. It doesn't look like much of anything that is readily identifiable. In fact, the gold color is quite unusual even for descriptions of UFOs. So apparently that's one of the pictures that they took and then submitted that. I think that was to Davenport over at New Fork. So there you go. Very interesting. Oh my, yeah. So October 19th, this is really interesting. So on that one day, one thing I guess I'll just add here is that there are a lot of military encounters that I noticed in 2008. Now, of course, the Stephenville event from January of 2008 in Texas, that's one that's quite famous, but there were many. that were recorded just by ordinary folks throughout the year, throughout the United States, primarily the United States. There were, I think, a few jet chases in other parts of the world, if I'm remembering correctly, mostly U.S. Let's go into these three. One was in Cary, Illinois. That's pretty close to Chicago, which was a significant area of activity in 2008. One at Minot, North Dakota. Of course, you got the big Air Force base there and a lot of nuclear missiles. And then Honolulu, Hawaii, again with military base out there. So let's do Cary, Illinois first. The witness is looking out a large window at, I think this is a female witness, at her friend's house. She saw jets approach O'Hare Airport at 4 p.m. Goes on and says, I was watching a jet when I saw a silver football-shaped object appear. So, yeah, actually, I don't think this is a military encounter. This is just a commercial jet, but let's just keep going. It was reflecting the sun, and I watched it for about 35 seconds. It then disappeared. It was about 1,000 feet below the jet. So I feel that the pilot of the jet also had to see it. That's a bare bones description of that event. Yeah, that one I forgot. That wasn't military. That seemed like a commercial jet. Even so, again, an object that just disappears right before someone's eyes. Again, you see this pattern over and over again with these sightings. And again, what is it doing near an airport? You know, we all know about the Chicago O'Hare Airport case of November 2006, but obviously here's another O'Hare Airport incident from just 2 years later, and no one really talked about that one. There was something there that I think we can safely say was not supposed to be there. So here's mine. Let me go into this one. So we're at 1 o'clock in the morning now. It's October 19th. Again, this is the same day as what happened in the Chicago area. October 19th, 1 a.m. You got two friends outside. They see a flying triangle, quote, with a tail. Person says it had 6 lights and was triangular in shape with a tail and was moving north and then just hovered. He writes, I am a member of the military and observed it with binoculars. It was pretty far up, but differed from the surrounding stars. The object arrayed its lights as blurred, while the stars surrounding were bright and cleared. So he fails to distinguish between this and the other objects. He said, while we were watching this object, a U.S. Air Force jet flew under it and left a chemtrail. He says, I believe, excuse me, I saw a UFO and tried to call mine at Airport Tower, but there was no answer. And again, one of the other interesting things about that, of course, is the whole connection with chemtrails. That's another thing you find a lot of in the cases of 2008, 2007, 2006. You know, I was noticing chemtrails a lot back in those years. I don't see them as much. I don't really know what the deal is with chemtrails anymore. I'm curious if anyone knows what is going on with them these days, because it certainly has receded, at least in my awareness, and I think the awareness of a lot of other people. Did they just, whoever was doing this operation, did they change the appearance of the chemicals? That is it possible that chemicals are still being sprayed, but you just can't see them as well? I've often wondered that. In any case, back during this period in 2008, you had a lot of people noticing the chemtrails. I was one of them, shaking my fist at the heavens. I don't like it when they steal my sunlight. But a lot of folks would notice UFOs up near the chemtrails. Not creating the chemtrails. That's always clearly identifiable by aircraft. But UFOs were there. And so this definitely prompted a lot of speculation. But I didn't really know if anyone had a solid answer to this. Anyway, this person, this member of the military, happened to see this as well. Okay, so let's talk about Honolulu. Same day, October 19th, 9:15 p.m. Man writes, I was driving my wife home on my moped. That's cool, dude. And we stopped at a light at 9:15 p.m. So they're outside. and heard a Black Hawk helicopter flying overhead. I looked up to see it chasing a ball of light. He says, I am a 10-year veteran of the U.S. Army, and I am air assault qualified, so I know what I'm looking at. What I saw was a U.S. Army Black Hawk chasing an object that flew in a pattern that no aircraft could fly in at speeds that no other craft could match. Sometimes it would go fast, then it would slow down so the copter could get closer. So was it playing games with the helicopter? Then it would shoot out again. Later that night, I heard jet engines flying over Honolulu. Oh my goodness. You know, when you talk a lot, sometimes you yawn. I think that's happening to me here. I heard jet engines flying over Honolulu for about 2 hours. What I'm glad about is that I've never done the yawn on a live YouTube live stream. That would be a little more embarrassing. I can do it here for you, but I'm going to try not to. Yeah, when I talk a lot, I'm sometimes fighting an instinct to yawn, and I couldn't win that one. But anyway, I think this is an interesting case here. Another military guy. He certainly sounded quite authoritative in describing that. And who am I to say that he's full of beans? I think he's probably telling the truth. Some of you might remember this. This is right around the election of 2008. You've got Obama versus McCain, of course. And this is just before the election. The election took place on November 4th, 2008. This is in Pueblo, Colorado. And this was filmed, I think this is shot live on, if I'm not mistaken, MSNBC. They recorded this. And I don't think anyone really had an answer to this. You had a number of photo analysts studying this. I think, people want to say maybe it was a bird. I don't know. I don't, it doesn't seem to have wings. It doesn't. And, here's one thing that I actually tried doing during preparation of this presentation, which was simply to look for like distant images in the sky of birds, of aircraft, and of other airborne objects, just to see, like, could any of them really honestly look like some of these objects, like this one here that is in the distance. And I mean, frankly, I couldn't find a single distant bird image that I thought was easily mistaken for one of these objects. It is true. I think sometimes if you get like a flying goose at a certain angle, if you're level with it, and if the wings are at a certain position, I suppose it could be deceptive. But I don't know. I have a really hard time explaining a lot of these images as birds or as aircraft. And this one here at the Obama rally, that kind of stumps me. I didn't see this video, but it was said that the object appeared to be flying too fast to be a blimp. And a blimp would be one thing that you might wonder. But according to the video itself, and all I have is an image of it. I haven't seen the video. I probably should find the video. I'm sure it's available somewhere. I do notice a lot of things are becoming more and more difficult to find on the web. Have you noticed this? Is it just me? In fact, I just saw a special on this by some of my favorite people on YouTube, TruthStream Media. That's Aaron and Melissa Dykes. I'm a huge fan of them. But she made the comment. She was observing search engines, and she said, like, when you search something on an engine, it says 1.2 million hits on this, and you see all the pages down below. She said, I actually tried going through that to see how many things actually turned up in the search, and it was never a million. It always stopped at like 400. And she said, try that you cannot get past that number. It just stops. So clearly our web searches are being, and by the way, they're being very curated, and what you're getting is incredibly mainstream, corporate, establishment oriented stuff more and more. And it is becoming very hard to find a lot of a lot of things on the web. For example, I'll just jump back to Stephenville because I have been looking into that for the past few days. I was trying to get copies of the printed version of the Stephenville Empire Tribune, which was a newspaper that Angelia Joyner wrote for during the early, the first month or so after that event, until she got fired. We're going to talk about that. And it's very difficult to find actual images of those printed copies. And I just cannot believe that they would be that impossible to find. The only way I got any was I went on to YouTube and I looked at a UFO Hunters episode that dealt with Stephenville, and they had like various clips of the Empire Tribune. But of course, they did that back in 2008. So copies were available. So that's on the YouTube, and it's just very quick little images, but I couldn't find any images of the actual Empire Tribune newspaper. And I just think that's very odd. Like, they should exist on the web somewhere, and yet I couldn't. Damned if I could find it. And I think what we're finding is curation is becoming so extreme on the web. It's becoming very, very difficult. So now I don't know about in the case of Obama's video, because to be fair, I didn't look. So I probably should. But it is very difficult to find more and more things, I will say, on the web. So here's another one over Fort Lauderdale. Look at the object there. We're going to zoom in on it in a minute. So this guy took a picture. He saw the object. This wasn't one of those things where he didn't see it. He saw something unusual. He photographed it, and you're going to see the close-up in just a minute. At 11:22, this is November 5th, 11:22 a.m., while shooting pictures for a school project at the beach off Seabreeze Boulevard, I noticed north of us a round, brilliant gold and white ball moving southeast direction and holding its altitude. I trained my camera at the moving element and zoomed in as much as I could with the normal lens I had on the camera at the time, following the element's southeast path. In total, I took 22 pictures of the UFO at 11:23 a.m. and we have one. Take a look at that. The blow up of the image shows that this was no weather balloon. It disappeared totally as it went 100% invisible right before my camera eye. Look at that. Yeah, that does not look like a weather balloon at all. That is perfectly spherical. You can see it reflecting the sunlight. It's almost, if you look in the dark area there, is that like a spot that you can see? I'm not quite sure. Maybe the resolution just is not going to be good enough, but it looks to me that there may be some kind of mark on that thing. Anyway, it's quite fascinating. Again, another instance in which the object just disappears right before your eyes. I think I've told many, many times of my own personal UFO sighting. I've had a couple. None of them are like incredible, but the most unusual one to me was in May of 1999. I was with my son, who at the time was 3 years old. And we were right in front of our house, right here in Rochester, on a beautiful sunny day, unusually so, where there were no clouds, not one single cloud in the sky. That's unusual, but that was the case on this particular day. And I was holding his hand on the sidewalk in front of our house, and I saw what appeared to me to be the brightest object that I'd ever seen in the sky, other than the sun in the daytime sky. I've never seen anything brighter. And I just thought, wow, that is the brightest object. What is that thing? And, in May of 1999, I was deep in the heart of writing my first book on UFOs in the national security state. So I was living and breathing UFOs. And I remember just looking at it thinking, that is very unusual. And then this unusual thought came into my mind. I don't know if it was unusual, but I think I must have realized there was something striking about this. And the thought entered my mind of, don't look away. Don't look away. Now, I didn't have a digital camera. No one had them back in those days. I was still using film. And camera was in the house, so I'm just like looking at this thing. But I had this idea, don't look away, because if you look away, you'll never see it again. And that's the part that was weird, because there was nowhere that this thing could have hidden in the sky. If I were to look away and then look back on it, I would absolutely you would think, be able to find it. There was nowhere for it to go. The problem that I had was my son was demanding my attention. He's watching me standing on the sidewalk like a statue, looking up at this thing, not saying a word. And I remember hearing him saying, "Daddy, Daddy," and he was starting to get very upset. And I thought, okay, I've got to be a dad here. So I pointed with my left hand to hold that thing's position in the sky. That's how insistent I was on not losing it. And I turned to my son for 1 second. I said, "I'm watching something. Hang on." And I looked back up, and the thing was gone. So I didn't get to see it disappear. And it was just the most weird thing. Absolutely bizarre. And, it was one of these things that really make you think there's a consciousness element going on with some of these sightings. And I have to think that it happened with me. I mean, otherwise it was just this weird coincidence that the thing just somehow zipped off. Maybe it was a coincidence, zipped off without me paying attention to it. Maybe that was it. But I spent the next 5 minutes after looking all over the sky for that thing, and it was just gone. That was nuts. So yeah, I mean, on that basis, I'm always interested in cases where people will say the object just disappeared right before their eyes. So, oh my goodness, this is a very, very interesting one. Now, this one, I'm going to want us to go line by line, very carefully with this particular case. When I first read it, it was very easy for me to dismiss it or not to think much of it. And then I stopped and I read it again, and then I read it again, and then I read it again. And when you go really slow and you see each thing, this is a young woman, she was 16 years old at the time. Every single statement that she makes, let's visualize what goes on here. She did not provide, I think her grandfather wrote in for her, but she is the witness. And I think George Filer, and this was only written to Filer's files. This is in no other source. He wrote Renton, Virginia, Renton, VA. And I looked up that, and there is no Renton, VA. There's a Reston, Virginia, and there's a Renton, WA, Renton, Washington. And I think that is what we are discussing here, because Renton is written a couple of times in the text as Renton, not as Reston. And so I think that's what we're talking about. But I think, in other words, George misread the W as V. That's what I think he did. I think he just made a mistake. So let's go through this. This is quite interesting. This is actually one of the more interesting cases, in my opinion. My name is Megan. I am 16 years old and live in the Firewood area east of Renton. Yeah, I was wondering if anyone knows that area, if there's a Firewood area. I tried looking this up and I couldn't really get a definitive piece on it. At about 9 p.m., I was taking my dog for a walk when he started barking and jumping up. Okay, so one thing, the animal notices something. I looked up and saw 4 lights above me that were in a diamond pattern and as big as my thumbnail. I assume thumbnail at arm's length. Diamond pattern. Let's keep that in mind. They were as bright as car headlights and were a yellow-white color. So let's visualize diamond pattern of lights. They lit up the area but didn't make any noise at all. Okay. The 4 lights changed from a diamond shape to a straight line before I could blink my eyes. Let's say that again. The 4 lights changed from a diamond shape to a straight line before I could blink my eyes. Now that's interesting. The first one stayed the same color and was the brightest. The others changed. 1 green, 1 blue, and 1 red, they were dimmer. So again, I mean, I just try to visualize this. You're seeing a diamond-shaped pattern of white, yellowish lights. I think it was yellowish. And let's go back. That were in a diamond pattern. Did she give a, I guess just white, yeah, yellow, white color. And then they changed. So from a diamond formation to a horizontal, one of them stayed the same color, very bright. The others went to different colors. Very bizarre. The row of lights started moving slowly to the west. Then they all moved in different directions at a very high speed. I've never seen anything move that fast. I believe that's all of her. Oh, no, we got a little bit more here. They moved apart in 4 directions and climbed up through the clouds. The clouds lit up as they went through. The whole thing took place in 15 to 20 seconds. And either she or the grandfather writes, others had to have seen this. I was scared and went inside. That's the end. So there's a lot going on in that brief description. And I mean, it was written out as this one big paragraph without a whole lot of punctuation or any breaks. And so it was easy to kind of miss the significance. You know, you start reading one UFO report after another, and you get kind of like numb. It really can easily happen, believe me. But that one, no, I thought that was one heck of a sighting. Really extraordinary activity going on here. And just that's some inexplicable stuff. So I assume these were clearly separate objects, but to have the ability to maneuver so rapidly, I mean, faster than she could blink her eyes, going from a diamond shape to a horizontal shape with 3 of the lights changing their color, and then going in different directions, and then zooming up into the clouds, where the clouds reflected that change of color as well. The clouds lit up as they went through. Like, that's just a dramatic thing to have witnessed. And, you know, I mean, it's just one of those things where a scientific skeptic's going to say, well, you know, we have no way to prove this, throw it out. And my attitude is, no, I actually don't want to throw it out. I have to go on my gut sometimes. Well, all right, I go on my judgment, I go on my gut. But I thought that seemed like a very believable case, in my opinion. So that is, again, why I'm including it here. So let's continue. I think this is the last one in the bunch that I'm including here. West Midlands, UK. Again, not far from Cardiff in Wales, if you remember from earlier in the year. Let's talk about this one. This one is, I don't know if I would call it spectacular. I would call it, it was one of these things where you have multiple witnesses, and it made the news. So I'll just read along here what I copied. David Crabtree, Midlands correspondent, reports spectacular display of dozens of UFOs has been reported in the skies over the West Midlands. Eyewitnesses told Sky News that up to 70 bright circular objects could be seen near Helzwyn. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Stunned residents watched in disbelief, convinced they were viewing an extraterrestrial spectacle. Each object was encircled with lights and had lights in the middle. There's a little bit more here. I want to just read this. The lights seemed to climb into the sky to the north of us just before 8 p.m. last night. I guess is this one of the witnesses talking here? A neighbor had shouted for us to come and look. There were so many objects. From a distance, they looked like bubbles rising in a fizzy drink. Then they came toward us and flew right over the top. Some were so close, they were almost touching and were only 100 feet or so above us. That, I think, is quite significant. And then the objects were absolutely silent and traveling at probably twice the speed of a normal aircraft. They were all circular and had 13 to 15 lights around the rim. Each had lights in the center which were flashing on and off. They went south at a terrific speed. That's another one where, you look at each statement individually, they are quite extraordinary. That was my last slide. Back in 07, 08, especially with UK sightings, I remember this quite distinctly. There was lots of talk about the so-called Chinese lanterns. Remember this? And that is a thing. So they're like paper lanterns. You have a light inside them. You set them aloft. There's, I guess, with hot air, and they look beautiful. They're actually really cool looking, and you can set them off there. And I guess around that time, maybe it was becoming a bit of a fad in the UK, or at least we were led to believe that Chinese lanterns was a fad in the UK, because, my God, you heard about it all the time as explanations of UFO sightings. I don't see how you could use a Chinese lantern explanation for that last one that I just went over with you from the West Midlands. You get these people talking in great detail. And again, it's like with the Stephenville case, which we're going to go to in a day or two. I'm going to have that up here for you. Lots of visuals I got for that. When you have so many witnesses so adamant about something that they saw that was so close to them, acting in ways that is just, incomprehensible. Look, I think you have to listen to what these people have to say. And so that's, again, what I choose to do when I go through these cases. It's honestly, it's an embarrassment of riches. There's just so many incredible UFO cases. And you noticed the only one in this batch that really had any notoriety were the Turkish videos. Some of you, I'm sure, remember that if you were engaged in the UFO subject back in 2007, 2008, you might remember the attention that was given to those videos. And, again, I never encountered a good debunking of those videos. But the thing is, of all the cases that we discussed here, that was the only one that really got any traction other than Stephenville, which, again, we're going to get to. So if you're just going off of like a bare bones pop culture knowledge of UFO sightings, you might just think, oh, yeah, there's that one sighting in Stephenville. Oh, yeah, and the Turkish ones. And you'd have no idea about all of these other just fascinating and frequently inexplicable events. And look, I can't confidently say that every one of the cases that I showed you from 2008, whether in part one or in this part two, do I know that they are all anomalous? No, I mean, I can't possibly know that. And I mean, I'm going to assume that several of them are probably not, they probably aren't genuine UFOs. I mean, who can tell? How can I know? They looked interesting to me, and that's why I showed them. But undoubtedly, some of them are probably a swing and a miss if we were to get more information about them, which we'll probably never get from any of these. But you can see for yourself, there's some really darned interesting photographs and descriptions and stories. I mean, the woman and her boyfriend in Evansville, Illinois, like what the hell was that? Like they're driving in the woods. Scariest night of my life. The 16-year-old girl in Renton, I think Washington, describing the pattern of lights just moving in ways that, how can one explain this? The military encounters, the police helicopter case over in Cardiff, where we started this off with. When you get witnesses like that, they're adamant about what they've seen. Who the hell am I to say, no, I don't think that's what you saw? I remember listening, I was going through, again, some old UFO history, and I read some statements by James McGaha. Some of you know his name. He was a former Air Force officer, a big-time UFO debunker. I met McGaha once myself. Totally obnoxious guy, like absolutely obnoxious. And when it comes to UFOs, honestly, he is a genuine know-nothing about the subject. But he tries to explain everything away. But he will often say, people don't really know what they're looking at. Pilots, trained observers, give me a break, he says. Pilots aren't trained observers. They're no better than anyone else. And I'm like, I don't really think that's true. It doesn't mean that they're infallible, but they are up in the sky a lot. And they do, notice when something's unusual in the sky. Like they're going to notice if there's something that's not normal. They're like high-level bus drivers. You go the same route back and forth over and over again. You're going to get to know your sky, and if there's something unusual that happens, you're going to notice that. So no, I think that they are qualified. But I think most witnesses, not just pilots, most people, when they see something that's very, very unusual, we have eyes for a reason. Survival. They work really well 99.9% of the time. We can be fooled, but I do tend to think that is very much overstated a lot by skeptics. They love to trot that one out. Yeah, no one's infallible. Instruments are not infallible. Human eyes are not infallible, but we've got them for a reason. They work pretty well. So anyway, okay, so that's all I've got for this. About 1 hour. Yeah, that's good. That's about what I expected. Hope you enjoyed this. And again, do stay tuned. I'm going to have Stephenville. I'm going to record that one pretty soon. I just need to organize it a little bit better. That case turned out to be much more complex than I realized. And it was almost a little embarrassing when I was going through it, thinking there are elements of this case that I actually never fully appreciated. So it's a deeply powerful, important event. And I'm going to do my best to do some justice to it. And because I really think, we're in an era of everyone's talking about UAP, the Navy's encounters, this and that. The Stephenville case is only in 2008. It wasn't that long ago. And it was a military encounter. And it was an object that was described literally as, quote, bigger than a Walmart. What was one quote? And headed, when it went off the radar scopes, in the direction of the Crawford Ranch, which is where President George W. Bush was staying at that time. Like, this thing was being chased by F-16s on its way to where the United States president was. I mean, come on. That's pretty interesting. There are people trying to debunk the radar data, people trying to play it down. I don't think it works at all. I think the Stephenville case is one hell of a case. And Angelia Joyner lost her job over covering it too. We're going to get into that. Okay. So I just need another day or two. And then I'm going to do a more casual fireside chat on Sunday. I think that's going to be the plan. Something a little more easygoing. Okay. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you all again real soon. Until then, later.